Football's right around the corner. Get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. And with the NFL returning, DraftKings is giving new customers $200 in free bets instantly when you bet $1 or more on any football game. Listen up because you don't want to miss this. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code TBPN to receive $200 in free bets when you place a $1 bet on any football game and get a free shot at $1 million top prize with your first deposit. That's promo code TBPN for a limited time only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 and older, New Jersey, Indiana, Pennsylvania only, new customers only, minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required, one per customer, restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Man, Ted Cruz stands with Beal, Wiggins, and Kyrie. KD loves David Letterman's jokes. And Russell Westbrook wants to go back home. Kind of. I'm Rosa Panta. This is the Clinic All-NBA podcast. Of course, I have the two hooligans with me again. JJ, how you living, my friend?
Living well, living good. What up?
John, how you living?
What's up? Happy International Podcast Day.
And we have a special guest. He's our LA Clippers resident clinic person. That was the horrible way to word that. But anyway, Sami, how you living, my friend?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. And I actually wanted to ask you, Sami, about what Russell Westbrook. Apparently, Wizards GM said Westbrook was open to a Lakers trade. And he said, hell no, to the Clippers. Sami, what do you think of this?
Why, Sami?
So I'm thinking this goes back to last summer. So I don't know if you guys remember this, but Ramona Shelburne wrote an article and said that Westbrook actually called Kawhi last summer to try to convince him to team up back in LA with the Clippers. And Kawhi turned around and called PG instead and basically rejected Westbrook. So I think Kawhi said hell no to Westbrook. So Westbrook this summer said hell no to the Clippers.
Ooh.
Interesting. I mean, John, what do you think of that?
Before I jump into this, I just want to give a shout out to my Jordanian brother from another mother, Sami. It's good to have you on the pod.
Shout out.
Shout out to Sami.
I appreciate the intro. Thank you.
So, as much as I want to believe Sami's story, I don't know where he got that from. I honestly believe that Westbrook was just telling the truth when asked. He said, what are your thoughts about potentially going to the Clippers? He said, hell no. Big capital letters too. HELL, in case anybody wasn't paying attention. No, Sami's right. In all honesty, with jokes aside, I think it was because Kawhi chose PG over him. It's a little snide. It's kind of an insult. And
right.
Westbrook is one of those guys who's super proud. He's very intense when he plays basketball, but he's also is an intense person. So I think his ego was probably hurt, and that was his response. But I honestly don't think he wanted to go to the Clippers either. He grew up an LA Laker fan, and so Sami, screw you. I'm kidding.
Well, that being said, I actually do agree with John. Like, if a team or a player turned around and rejected you, then you're not going to come groveling to them the next summer, even if they wanted you. So to go to the Lakers and try to stick it to the Clippers again, as the Lakers have been doing for the last 75 to 100 years, it's like, why not? So I understand it.
Do you guys think that Russell Westbrook wanted this to come out? Or is this just completely random? JJ, what do you think?
He's a confident guy. He doesn't care. He yells at fans. He goes after players. He doesn't have anything to hide. He doesn't have a mask. So, and even if it did get released without his permission, he's like, so what? Bring it. Bring it, yeah. Clippers.
I mean, Russell Westbrook has some of the most interesting interactions with media. I mean, we've all seen it. We've all heard things that have said. But anyway, moving on to the next topic. The NBA has announced that players won't be paid for missing games over COVID-19 vaccine mandates. And there's some notable names here where their vaccination status is kind of questionable. I mean, we have Bradley Beal, Wiggins, and possibly Kyrie Irving. Bradley Beal, he's quoted with saying, "It's funny that it only reduces your chances of going to the hospital." Rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Sami, what do you think about Bradley Beal's comments?
Well, I think Beal's comments overall kind of speak to, depending on where you choose to get your information without, deep diving into that topic too far, you're going to have a certain view of what the vaccine does, and that probably explains his hesitancy. So whereas wherever he's getting his info from, clearly he doesn't think that it's as effective as it needs to be overall.
Right. I absolutely agree. And Wiggins had a quote here saying, "I'm going to keep fighting for what I believe is right. What's right to one person isn't right to the other, and vice versa." He then declined to explain what those beliefs actually entail, per se. And he said, "It's none of your business. That's what it comes down to." JJ, what do you think of Andrew Wiggins' comments here?
Well, first of all, when he says it's none of your business, he's true on that, but it's not entirely true because the NBA is a public circus. Unfortunately, your fans provide you your salary. So it kind of sucks, but that's how it is. I mean, when we look at the situation, you could only think like objectively, how should Wiggins think? So if I was the GM, Bob Myers, I'd probably ask my employee the following questions, which is, all right, you don't want to get the vaccine. Do you know anyone that has personally been affected? Right. You could say Wiggins knows Karl Anthony Towns. They're on the same team. That's a brotherhood.
That's true.
His mother died from COVID. So maybe he doesn't believe that was the primary cause of death. You go towards, diet and health. Like, I need to know what's in the ingredients, what am I intaking, so on and so forth. But if I'm Bob Myers, I'm scrolling down this dude's IG page and I see him taking a sip of Henny. Do I question that? And then if you're not going to do it for your fans and for your teammates, which should be, straight up the first thing that you think of, maybe not, but you should, do you give up your money? We always have that question, when we're having some cocktails or, some drinks, and those questions like, what would you do for $5? What would you do for 20? How about this? What would you do for your $30 million contract?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, JJ. I think you have some great points here.
I think it's also interesting. Sorry, June. I think it's interesting in terms of getting paid, these NBA players. It'll be interesting to see how much they really believe in what they say, right? When it comes down to it, because if they do, then money wouldn't be an option. They will make the decisions with conviction and they'll do what they say. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with some of these guys.
Yeah, super interesting. And I think I speak for everyone here. I think when the pandemic first started and someone knows someone that quit their job because of their fear or worries about COVID, depending on your, health situation. So that's a great point, but now it's kind of on the flip side with vaccinations. But moving forward, the last one is Kyrie Irving. He was in a presser where they were trying to kind of coax him to answer whether or not he was vaccinated because he did a Zoom call. And they're like, can we just naturally assume that you're unvaccinated? And he pretty much said that it's personal. John, do you think it's personal?
I do. But JJ made a good point. He works for the NBA, or he plays in the NBA, which is as public as it gets. They have a business to uphold. It's a business at the end of the day. And they have certain rules and regulations and standards that they set, also with the cities that they play in. So while I do agree that it is personal, and it's also kind of isn't, just because you are potentially affecting other players, you're affecting the fans who will be in the arena and things like that. So it's a tough question. I agree with him that it is personal, but it's kind of a little bit, again, it may not be.
Well, staying on the topic of Kyrie, John, kind of to steer away a little bit from COVID, he had this quote about being a distraction. And it was, I know that the focus has to be at an all-time high, no distractions. And this was the last thing I wanted to create, was more distractions and more hoopla and more drama around this. Do you think this statement is kind of interesting?
I think it's interesting just because he's been a distraction multiple times last year and years prior. I don't think it's anything new. I mean, he's the only guy in the NBA other than Kawhi Leonard that can just take time off without notice. Everybody else would have to give plenty of notice, but Kyrie's a superstar. He's won a championship and he has the credentials, so they're going to give him the leeway. They're going to cater to him in that regard, just like any other superstar. So I think it's just funny. I think it's ironic because he's been a distraction before any of this topic of COVID or vaccinations even came about. So to me, it's just funny.
Yeah, it
just
really...
sorry.
No, go ahead, Sami. Go for it.
I was just going to comment off of that. First of all, I love that John had to throw Kawhi in there. Naturally, I'm gonna also remind him a couple years back, LeBron took 2 weeks off to train with Dwayne Wade in Miami in the middle of the season. So I'm just gonna bring that up first.
I'm gonna need proof of that. Show me documentation, please.
I'll show you multiple websites. It's called Google. Take a look. The other thing with Kyrie, and I think this goes to not just him but a lot of superstars, is a lot of these guys, they've been obviously highly prized commodities in terms of what they do for a living for a lot of their lives. And I don't think they necessarily have been used to hearing no or something outside of, people just agreeing with what they're thinking. So sometimes I wonder if he realizes how much of a distraction he's being, or if he's genuinely that naive that his stances and some of the way he's thinking about stuff is causing a huge distraction for the team around him, because he's probably, along with a lot of professional athletes, just so insulated from the world that, the four of us live in, for example. It's a very different world for a Kyrie Irving or a LeBron James than it is for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And JJ, I wanted to ask you, with Kyrie's, I guess, sort of antics, or I don't know what you will call it exactly, but he's definitely a distraction. I guess it's been reported that there's a lot of GMs that think that Kyrie Irving's trade value is virtually nothing. Do you think that's true?
If Chris Paul could get traded with that contract from Houston to the Suns, and he was that old and quote unquote washed up, I think anyone could get traded.
My only counterpoint is that Chris Paul would actually miss games because he's like a glass man, like he gets injured. Kyrie Irving, it's like he just decides to take out his PTO without asking for permission. John, what do you think of that?
You know what they say, right? The best ability is availability. And you mentioned Chris Paul. He's been injured multiple times in crucial moments throughout the playoffs, and it costs the Rockets, it costs whatever team he was on at the time, the Clippers back in the day. So it's, to me, to say virtually zero is kind of, it's a reach. It's kind of crazy. Let's be honest. I mean, Kyrie Irving is still a superstar player. He still brings extreme value to the basketball court when he's available. The issue that is he's pretty volatile, right? He has going through some things mentally, and maybe he's struggling. We don't know. We don't know what's going on in the mind of Kyrie Irving other than he thinks the earth is flat. But he's, again, it's availability is the most important thing, I think. And then your skill and your talent don't matter if you're not going to be able to be on the court. So I think it's definitely diminished his trade value, but to say zero, come on, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, just out of curiosity, Sami, if the Clippers were interested in trading for Kyrie Irving, what would you give up?
Wow,
Paul George.
That's a good question. I will freely say that along with availability, I think the other thing that is the biggest issue with Kyrie is reliability. you just don't know day to day what things are going to look like. So that being said, definitely not PG or Kawhi, frankly. I think as a pure basketball player, Kyrie is probably more talented than Paul George. But for any flaws or perceived flaws with Paul George, he normally shows up and he plays every day. And you just don't know if you're going to get that from Kyrie. So for me, honestly...
Sorry, Sammy, did I cut you off?
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask Jun, do you think KD wants to is he tired of Kyrie's crap or what?
Oh, man. I mean, it's tough to say, right? Because KD kind of sort of does the same stuff. So I feel like KD has Kyrie's back to a certain extent. But I think this year is important. I mean, if the antics get super high and is just not available, like Sami was saying, and is not reliable, I think KD could be pretty fed up and might want to trade Kyrie somewhere else and actually get like a piece that's gonna be there every single day. So,
yeah, and they won't trade. They're not going to trade him based off last year because he didn't do anything. He just got injured. He landed on Giannis's foot and he got injured, so that's why he was unavailable. He wasn't unavailable for saying something outlandish or not showing up to work or not showing up to practice. So I think it's hard for them to make that decision. But you're right. He might be on a tight leash this year.
Well, and let's say he doesn't get vaccinated. We already know that the most games he can play is 41.
Yeah.
I think they'll be tired of him by January, and if that's the case, because then, I mean, part of having a big three is always if you need to rest guys, if whatever the case is, if you have three guys, you can always sit one and you'll still have Harden and Durant. You'll have Irving and Durant in that scenario. If you're not able to do that for any of the home games this year, I think they'll get really tired of him by, like I said at the start of the calendar year, especially if one of the other two guys gets hurt.
And I know you said 41, which is true, but what if Kyrie doesn't even play a full season? It could be diminished to like 20 games.
Yeah.
Are you talking about like just the PTO he takes to like clear his head?
I'm saying if he doesn't get vaccinated, he can't play in the state.
Oh, well, yeah, I know that. But I'm talking about like reducing from 42 to like 20 something, like JJ was saying.
Yeah.
Like maybe, because sometimes he just doesn't feel like playing, depending on what's going around in his head, depending on, I don't know, man, just Kyrie being Kyrie. But moving on to the next topic, we're going to have some fun with mid-tier power rankings, according to ESPN. And we're going to try to decide or decipher like which one of these teams we think would have the best chance to win a championship or just go on a run during the playoffs. I'm going to start at the number 16. It's the Grizzlies, Hornets, Pacers, Bulls, Raptors, Wizards, Pelicans, Spurs, and Kings. So if we all think about that sort of list, which team do you think is the most interesting out of them? John?
I'm going to go with the Chicago Bulls because they made some great moves this offseason. They got my boy, the Caruso, the GOAT, is what we call him in La La Land. The bald Kobe. I don't know. That just came to mind. I don't think they call him that. They also got Lonzo Ball, who I think is going to be a good pickup in terms of just his defense, because they already have Zach LaVine, and then they also picked up, of course, Jimmy Buckets. So I think the Bulls have a great team. I'm not completely familiar with their bench. Sorry, Chicago Bulls fans. I'll take a look at it in more depth, but just in terms of their starting lineups and their key role players, I think they have a great squad. Now, again, whenever you bring that many new pieces into a fold, you have to account for chemistry, getting acclimated with each other. So if they can pull it together, I think they have the most talent probably of any of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. The Chicago Bulls do look kind of scary. Sami, what do you think?
I actually really like what Memphis is doing. I think if John Morant played in any bigger market, he'd be way more talked about than he is. And he might be, in my opinion, the most underrated player in the league right now. I also think that because they're in such a small market, everyone forgot that Jaren Jackson was injured for most of last year too. So you're talking about one of their bigger pieces between those two guys, Dillon Brooks. I'm not a huge fan of Steven Adams' game in today's NBA, but I do think he fits on that squad. So I think if Morant takes another step forward this year, that's the team that can go into a series knowing they have an absolute superstar. And we've seen the playoffs over and over. Those superstars are the ones that win games and win series. So I like what they're doing, personally.
Sami, I am 100% agreeing with you. That was also my choice. I've got a huge basketball crush on Dillon Brooks, actually. The University of Oregon player. I mean, his defense is so nasty. He was developing somewhat of an offensive flow too with Ja Morant. They just seem to gel as a nice backcourt. And yeah, I actually like Steven Adams just for the identity. I mean, just for the toughness. Right. And that's like the grindhouse, right? So he fits the mold. I like that pick. JJ, what's your pick?
You guys took all the good picks away, but I would probably say out of the rest of the teams that you didn't state already, the Pacers.
Ooh.
You know, the Pacers for the past 2 or 3 years, they've been like undercover good. When you play them, they play hard. They stretch the games out, really good defense. And this could be the year that they could really, move up to the upper tier of teams. And they had injuries last year. I think people forgot that. They were projected to perform better, but injuries happened. And last year was the season of injuries. So it's going to be nice to see what the Pacers could do with the healthy squad.
They also significantly upgraded that coach. Their coach was a mess last year. They let him go after 1 year and they brought in Carlisle. That's going to help them a lot.
Yeah, that's a good pickup. Definitely.
Hey, I noticed one thing. Sorry, June. I noticed one thing about this list. This is mid-tier, right? Where are the Clippers on here?
They're at number 12 where they should be above this list, John.
Sorry, just needed some clarity.
That's what I'm here for. I'm here to provide that clarity for you.
I'm just sort of browsing the East and West power rankings. I kind of put them 1 through 11 on our outline here. And if we're not looking exactly like right at the power rankings, like the mid-tier power rankings, who in the East, like you could look from, let's say, 5 down, who in the East do you think kind of sneaks up on people? Is there anyone, like any team there that like kind of jumps out at you that we didn't notice or that we didn't mention?
I'm gonna from like power rankings 6 through 11
that we didn't mention, or that's on this list. Sorry.
That we didn't mention. That's on this list. So from 1 through 11.
Oh, okay.
So maybe like, cause on the East, like this is set, dude. Like the Nets, Bucks, Heat, 76ers. I think we can all agree that's probably appropriate. I don't know if the Hawks should necessarily be there at number 5. So you got the Hawks, Celtics, Pacers, Hornets, Raptors, Bulls, Wizards.
I would say the Celtics.
I agree.
The Celtics have always had a strong, squad. They have Tatum, they have Brown.
Right.
That should have been like the best combo guard position team for the past few years. They're two-way players as well. I don't know why they haven't performed. And, they had Brad Stevens, and we all thought that Brad Stevens was a really great coach, actually. So it's going to be interesting to see if the team adapted and if there are going to be any changes. Because if not, the Celtics, I think, should look into trading one of their stars by next year.
Yeah, Sami, you seem to agree with JJ. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the last 2 years, in part, they underachieved to me because they had these star point guards and they could never stay healthy. Kemba couldn't stay healthy. Unfortunately, his knee had some issues, and then Kyrie couldn't stay healthy while he was there, and he had obviously very well-documented chemistry issues with the squad. I really liked the steps Tatum took at the end of last year. I actually think he's a legitimate dark horse MVP candidate if they play a little better than expected this year. And it just seems like they're going to have a little more stability. And the last few years, for how young that squad was, they were really burdened by expectations. Everyone thought they were going to take another step after they made the conference finals a few years ago. And sometimes some teams, if they're too young, can't handle that. So now they're not being as talked about. No one thinks they're going to be elite. So I do think this is a year where they could, if all things fall into place, step forward and be better than what everyone's expecting.
And just to add on really quick, I think everyone forgets that Tatum and Brown are under 25 still.
Yeah, so they're still developing. John, what do you think of the Dennis Schroeder-led Celtics? Do you think they have a chance to crack this
He's sad
top
right now.
four?
Next question, please. No, I think, God bless Dennis Schroeder, and I hope sometimes we make regrets in life, and God knows that he made a pretty big one. So he has a pretty big regret, but he didn't secure the bag. Hopefully he does well with the Celtics. Actually, I did want to mention that one of these teams, I'd probably have to go with the Hornets, and I think they're going to make a leap. I might say that they might make the playoffs, and I know that the media, we love to rag on this kid because he's the son of LeVar Ball, but I think he's the real deal. And I think he's going to just continue to improve and show that he can lead a team to the playoffs. I think he's that good. And despite all that outside noise or what you think of him as, his personality or what he does on Instagram, all that nonsense, I'm not a fan of it, but in terms of actual skill and the way that he can play ball, he's up there. And I think he could potentially be an MVP probably in like 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, I like that team too. Like they're super interesting. I mean, they picked up Kelly Oubre. Of course, the Melo Ball's there. They drafted James Bouknight, who I liked coming out of the draft. Miles Bridges is there. Gordon Hayward. I mean, They have a squad. And if their coach could get them to play with like some pretty good chemistry, I think that could be a pretty dangerous team. Like a team I wouldn't necessarily want to see in the playoffs. So I think that's a good take. I'm going to move on to the West here. The West, 1 through 4 is set. Possibly. Maybe 1 through 3. What do you guys think? Lakers, Suns, Jazz, Nuggets, do they belong at 4?
Not yet, to me, only because we don't know when Murray's going to come back. And I think Jokic is, even to now, probably still underrated for how good he is. But without Murray, I don't think we can lock them in the 4.
What do you guys think about that Michael Porter Jr. contract?
Ooh. $205 million for 5 years.
Yeah. That's a gamble.
I mean, what are you guys' thoughts on that? Do you think he's worth it? His game is worth it?
Right now, no, but he could get there, and I don't think they had a choice. If they didn't give him that and they let him go to restricted, someone would have done it, and so they were going to end up having to pay him at some point anyway.
The thing for like $25 million per year with Porter is that he doesn't play defense, and they need defense.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. His offensive upside is like through the roof, though. You hope to coach the guy to at least play good team defense, but an on-ball defender, that guy gets mixed up every single time, man. He gets blown by every time. I mean, good luck to the Nuggets with that contract, but I think Sami's right that was really their only choice, and they haven't been able to score big free agents either. So I do like the strategy of paying players that you draft. But anyway, the list goes Nuggets, Warriors, Mavericks, Clippers, Blazers, Grizzlies, Pelicans, Spurs. And that's 3 through 11. Which one of these teams do you think could surprise people?
Okay, I'm going to go hot take right here, which is
Lakers.
I'm going to say the Blazers were ranked top 3 last year. Now they're at number 8. But I've been hearing reports that I know Chauncey Billups, people think it's a big pickup, but we're getting the same lineup that we've had for years. We know what we're getting: CJ and Dame and Nurk, and there's a potential chance that they may not even make the playoffs. I know this is blasphemous, but I've been, been kind of paying attention to Dame, and he doesn't seem happy.
Yeah.
I think he's out of there by the end of the season.
I think that's what a lot of people think. The people of Portland, what's up, Portland? The people of Portland really believe that that man is loyal. Like he's gonna stick it all the way through. He wants to ride this thing with Chauncey and see what happens, especially after like Dame Lillard's like media day. They were very confident in his words. He was saying things like I got married this year. I've been through ups and downs with my now wife. I've also had people tell me I shouldn't make an album. And then he reflected that with the Blazers, where he's like, I've had ups and downs with the Blazers, but I've always stuck it through. So who knows what he's gonna do, man? But he's like, O'Shea and Billups, they're definitely in the hot seat, or at least that's the public perception, is that they're in the hot seat. And JJ's right, man. We've seen a lot of the same lineups out of the Blazers. John, what do you think? What team are you going with?
This is gonna make 2 people on this episode happy.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Is this full serious?
No, I'm 100% serious. I'm going with the Golden State Warriors. And I say that because they didn't have Klay last year. And they took the Lakers to the play-in game and almost won. Now, the Lakers were kind of a mess last year, but granted, nobody thought the Warriors were going to be able to hang with the Lakers, and they did. They almost beat them. Now you add a healthy Klay, and I think Klay, his game is not going to be affected as other players from an ACL and even Achilles injury, just because he's not athletic to begin with. He doesn't really use his athleticism. He doesn't need his athleticism to be effective, and I think he's going to come back better than people expect. Given that, with that and the team, a young team that's going to get more experience, Steph is just going to be Steph, obviously, and you have some good young pieces. I think the Warriors are going to make some noise, and as a Laker fan, I wouldn't want to play them. Steph is the scariest dude in the NBA. He can hit it from anywhere on the court.
You know what's cool? Is that Lakers and Warriors, everyone wants to see that matchup, and not the Clippers.
This guy. John,
this guy.
Does it worry you a little bit that Klay Thompson might not be available until January now, they're saying?
No, it doesn't worry me, just because Klay and Steph have that chemistry. Maybe with other guys, but Draymond's going to be there, and I think Draymond is the key here. He is the facilitator. He's the glue of the team, and I think any Warrior fan would agree to that. As long as he's there, he's going to be able to keep the team in sync, and they'll get their reps in. January is it's obviously a lengthy time into the season, but they have plenty of time before the playoffs start into late spring, early summer.
So what I'm getting is that you think the Warriors will be able to hold pat and make it to the playoffs in time for Klay to come back, and then they're going to be absolutely scary in the playoffs.
100%.
Got it. Sami, which of this list, what team of this list do you think might
Well,
surprise
so
people?
my initial agreement was with John as well. I think the Warriors are the biggest wild card on this list. If Klay comes back at 80% of what he was, they naturally mesh. We know what that team looks like at its peak. But since John mentioned that, I'm kind of divided between 2 other teams here. One would be the Mavericks. I'm a little iffy on Jason Kidd based on his last few coaching stops, but
yeah,
Luka clearly looks ready to take another step forward. I think his biggest thing was taking the offseason seriously, getting himself in shape, because he clearly kind of did not last offseason. And I know part of that was the bubble and coming off of that. But having watched him in 2 first-round series against the Clippers the last 2 years, that guy is terrifying to be rooting against. Obviously, Porzingis has had his injury issues. You got to think that he's going to want to bounce back on some level. Can he stay healthy? If he can, then I could see them scaring teams, just because Luka's a potential MVP, and you just don't know what to do with that. Now, as much as this will sound like a homer take, because John said the Warriors, I will only say with the Clippers, if Kawhi does come back by the end of the year and they're a 6 or a 7 and he's back, no team at the top is going to want to play that squad, like at the top. I don't think if the Jazz fall in at 3 and the Clippers come in at 6 and Kawhi came back after what happened last year, the Jazz are not going to want to play that team. My gut is that Kawhi is not going to come back this year, just because we know he's very careful with his health. But that would make them a huge wild card, because you're adding in a top 5 player in the league at the end of the season.
Yeah, I would have to absolutely agree with that, and also agree with your Mavericks take. I mean, Luka Doncic almost took, Slovenia, like, to the championship game. And that team was full of nobodies. So who knows, man, what he could do. The sky's the limit for him. I'm going to go to our last topic. And that, of course, is David Letterman hilariously interviewed Kevin Durant at Nets Media Day. And he asked the question, why do people call you KD? And KD answered, well, K is for Kevin and D is for Durant. And it totally threw Kevin Durant off guard. Sami, what did you think of this interview?
Well, clearly, like you said, KD was caught off guard and probably was maybe in a burner account or two later on in the evening, asking why Letterman was there interviewing people. I mean, David Letterman's going to be Letterman. I mean, he's just trying to get a rise out of people. Clearly, he did a good job of that. And hopefully for KD's sake, he didn't take it too seriously. But we know at times he struggles with that. So I just think it was just a gag that probably didn't go over as well with him as David Letterman probably would have hoped.
Kevin Durant also said, or asked KD if he would play for the Knicks on his off days. JJ, what did you think of David Letterman?
Some of his questions, you need to know his humor. Like, he was really well known during the 90s, especially with our generation and older generation, and he could be pretty dry. One, I don't think his style of comedy fits today. Like, you could just ask the youngins out there, like, what do they call you KD? Like, they're probably gonna think, like, you can't ask a better comedic question than that. However, I am laughing at the fact that he asked KD if he would play for the Knicks on his off day, and Durant took it so serious because that fool's mad sensitive. So KD, like, come on, man, get with the program. Don't get mad, because when you get mad, people are gonna even make fun of you more. That's what we do to each other.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. He also asked, at what percentage is Kevin Durant are we going to get this year? Is it 70, 80, 90, 100, 110? And of course, Kevin Durant's like, I don't know, 110. John, what do you think of these questions from David Letterman?
Kevin Durant must be fun at parties. My goodness. This guy, man. Maybe you should say the K is for Kevin and the D is for Downer. Dude, this guy, man. I mean, I get it. Like, David Letterman, maybe he didn't. Was David Letterman wearing a disguise or something? Or maybe just KD didn't realize it was David Letterman. Anyway, it's clearly a joke. Maybe the first one just went over his head, but the second one is clearly a joke. Like, nobody in the right mind, no real reporter would ask on your off day, on your days that you're not playing for the Nets, would you play for the Knicks? I mean, clearly a joke, Kevin, and you need to lighten up a little bit, but I think it's just funny. Anytime Kevin Durant's in the media, anytime he's being sensitive, super duper sensitive, I'm sure there'll be a Instagram response or something online soon, but it's just funny to me. KD, keep being you, because without it, we wouldn't have this great content. So thank you, my man.
I mean, Kevin Durant, like, did you not realize that you were going to get, like, the most dry jokes when David Letterman popped up and he said, yes, I'm from Basketball Digest? It's like, that thing, like, that's like what your grandpa read that, like, was right next to the TV guide. Like, that doesn't even exist anymore. Anyway, I give mad props to David Letterman just because he knew exactly who he was targeting. He's like, I'm going to target Kevin Durant because I know he's sensitive and it's going to get a rise out of him. So mad props to him. Anyway, that is it for our episode tonight. I want to thank JJ for being on. Thank you, man.
Thank you for not mentioning Ben Simmons.
Oh, man. There was Ben Simmons news too. But anyway, John, thank you for being on.
Hey, thank you. And I want to do a quick shout out, bro. Thank you for keeping this circus together. Jay, thanks for being Thank you, Jay, for being a great co-host, and Sami, my Jordanian brother. Thank you for being a guest on today's episode.
Thank you, Sami.
Thanks for guesting, man.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for being here and keeping John in line. It's a hard job.
Touche.
Absolutely. Of course, I'm Rosa Panta. This is the Clinic All NBA podcast. Come find us wherever you find your podcasts.